Our meeting to order. So glad you could join us.
Yeah, you will.
All right, we are grateful that you can all be here today. Thank you so much for participating. And Jeannie Simmons is going to do our opening ceremony. Thank you, Jeannie.
Chairs are everywhere. Good evening. I spend a lot of time thinking about our community, about what works, about what doesn't work, about how we can change, grow, and continue to thrive. There are pressures constantly pushing this community into new shapes and into new normal. So tonight, before we discuss change and allocation, I wanted to remind myself and you of a few things I find create a sense of place. A full moon setting on the Wellsvilles in early spring. A full moon rising in the middle of winter, peeking slowly from behind the mountains, lighting the night so vividly that you can walk as if it were early evening. The vivid colors of fall, the intense green of spring. The way sunlight plays through the maples on my park strip. The mountains that define our backdrop provide recreation and solitude, water and food. It is hunting season after all. The first snow, even if it creates chaos, is beautiful and oh so white. The painted intersections of homecoming. Whoever it is that clears my sidewalk of snow in their four-wheeler. City workers who work extra days and hours to deal with the chaos of the first snowfall or a windstorm. The many organizations created to help those who need a helping hand. Trails to walk, parks to play in. A free bus system, a world-class university which, by its very existence, has shaped this town for more than 100 years. Hundreds of USU graduates who came here from all over the world and still say this is the best place they have ever lived. The passion of citizens about their neighborhoods. The Christmas music played on the loudspeaker from the tabernacle. The arts, the music, the theater, the parades, and the new festivals that highlight our talents and our diversity. The police bringing pizza and drinks to protesters. The ability, and finally my ability, to help shape this community, and all of our ability to help shape this community for the future, heeding the pressures and understanding the concerns. If you would all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any poet laureate? It's no poem.
Thanks for sharing that, Gina. Sometimes we forget the things that are around us that we take for granted sometimes. Yeah, for sure. The snow was very white when I was tromping through it the other day.
Well, when my puppy got to play in the snow, I thought he was white, and the snow was much whiter, and he was thrilled.
In the second cabin, I know my dog loves snowballs. So it's all good. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I'm open for a motion for acceptance of minutes and approval of the agenda.
I so move.
I'll second. Sorry, got distracted.
No, thank you. It's been moved and seconded for acceptance of the minutes and approval of the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's been accepted. Thank you. Our regular meeting schedule are the first and third Tuesdays at 5:30, and our next meeting will be November 2nd. Don't forget to get out and vote. Send your ballots in.
Did you get a sticker?
I did, I got a sticker, because I dropped my ballot in the box out here, and I grabbed a sticker off the roll, and I applied it. You should get one.
I'm gonna grab one.
Yes, you should go get one. So don't forget, it is voting day on the 2nd, so please participate. Now is the opportunity, if you have questions or comments for the mayor and council. If you have something you'd like to say or address the council at this point, please step to the microphone, share your name, make sure you've signed in, please. Let us know where you live, and please take 3 minutes or less, and hopefully it will be about something that is not on our agenda tonight.
No, it has to be.
What?
Don't let them, it has to be, not about
It
it.
should not be on the agenda.
Correct.
Yes, it should not. That's what I was getting to. Should not be on the agenda because we'll get to that later in the program tonight. So, all right, now's your opportunity if you have questions or comments.
If I may, thank you, John Shivik, Logan, Utah. Thanks for allowing me to talk once again. And I want you to know that I don't want you to be apprehensive every time I come up here, like I'm just going to whine or complain about things, although
This
that might
whole
be the
gets
case.
in the pits of our
Because,
stomachs. Yeah.
The first thing I've been trying to be engaged and come to these as much as I can. I think it's for a bunch of reasons, but it already has been useful. I can tell you, just even after the last meeting, the first thing I went and did is trim the shrub in my parking strip. So you learn things by being engaged and being part of this as well. So I appreciate it. But the one thing that I noticed in Mayor, one of the flyers that was sent out talked about no raising of property taxes, which is technically true. And I congratulate you or Pod or whatever for that. But I do, and it stimulated me, this discussion you've heard from me before about the utilities thing. And I did go back and look, and since 2018, my utility increase 28% of the flat fees in those couple of years. That translates to about $500 a year for my house. However, I looked into it a little deeper, to be fair, too. And if I get all this, let me know if I'm wrong anywhere. But that was a 15% increase in transfers from the utilities to the general fund. And I'm not even going to count the administrative fees increase. That was another, 16%, because that one I'm kind of okay with, right? And I'm actually okay with the transfers. And again, I do understand the need for it. I'm okay with the transfers. But what I get concerned about is, one, just being really transparent about what's going on, that these increases have been happening over the years, and that it doesn't increase property tax. But I get really concerned, especially if we really, really care about affordable housing. This is a really regressive tax. Somebody with 500 square feet pays $80 a month. Somebody 5,000 square feet pays $80 a month in flat fees. And I would just like to consider, as we go forward, I've said this before, just really be thinking if these are going to keep on increasing, maybe base it a little bit more on usage. And I understand there's some uncertainty in that. And just be really thinking about how these flat fees especially impact people with smaller houses and lower incomes. So that's what I wanted to comment on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for participating too, John.
Can I clarify just one thing? Just
Go
so
ahead.
everybody's transfers would be a percentage of revenue, and that has not changed for the last probably 10 or 15 years. I think what probably happened is we recognized the 911 fee as a transfer because there was no other justification for it. I believe if you look at that, that's probably what happened there.
Okay, thank you. I'll go back and look at that. All I did is I just took the total amount transferred in 2018. I just took the total amount transferred then and total amount transferred there now.
Yeah,
So it wasn't, and then I took that as a percentage increase.
Yeah, the transfer has been a continuous percentage of revenue, and so
Of
that
the
really,
overall.
it shouldn't change it except for, like I said, the 911 fee used to go directly to 911, but just as a technical matter, we call it a transfer rather than
I know.
a fee.
Yeah.
So that's probably what caused the the difference is what
Okay, that helps. So I'm sorry, I don't want to take time. So overall, the transfer amount of funds, total funds, is the same percentage. However, the absolute value of money that is transferred has increased.
Yes.
Okay,
That's
thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. All right, seeing no other questions, let's move on. Mayor, you have some reports for us. Lots of excitement in the city.
Yeah, a little more excitement than we prefer to have around here. Just to give you an update on the storm cleanup, of course, this was pretty unusual. We did have a wind situation about a year ago that did take down a number of trees, but the quantity of branches that came down with this storm, as you've probably seen, has been a bit overwhelming. So again, as Jeannie mentioned in her very lovely opening remarks, just a shout out to all of our crews that dealt with that. I mean, the light and power guys worked a couple of 18-hour days, and by Tuesday evening, they had all but I think 17 homes. The power was reconnected, and for those that weren't connected, there was an electrical problem on the other side of the meter that they had to have an electrician address first. Our fire department, just because of all the branches coming down on power lines and sparking fires, they had a record-setting 24 hours. Just the number of calls was pretty staggering.
My mother lost her power service, and we had an electrician come in and fix that for her. And the city crew was there 40 minutes after they were done. We were so impressed. They did such a great job.
They did, and we had a couple of crews from Bountiful come help us out, because when they had a huge storm a couple of years ago, we sent some crews down. Again, on fire, we go to some of the other communities to help on mutual aid agreement to help them. We actually needed their help. It's not as often that we need their help, but they came to help us. Again, our public works crews, parks crews, forestry crews, police, everybody just jumped in and responded. We think we probably have maybe 40% of the streets cleared of all the trees, and we would just ask people, it's like leaf cleanup. Once we come through your neighborhood once, we're done. Please, once it's cleaned up, don't drag more things out to the park strip. And technically, the trees in the park strip do belong to the city, and so we've been trying to clean up that. But please take care of things in your own yard. Don't bring things from your backyard out. Take those directly to the landfill. Again, landfill employees are another category. Working long hours, we've extended opening hours of the landfill, opened up more area to try and just speed up the time that people have to spend dropping green waste off. We're going to be chipping for a year, I think, to get through the mountain. And we do have some parks that are still closed, and our Riverwalk Trail, they cleaned the branches off, but they're still waiting for the city forester to come and look at the overhead branches, making sure there aren't anything, there's no dangerous branches that could be coming down. So hopefully that will open up in the next couple of days, but a lot of the parks are open. Willow Park is going to be closed for a while. You've seen that. It's just littered with branches and limbs.
So's Merlin Olsen.
Yeah. And again, we tried to put the dumpsters out at different parks, and clearly they get overwhelmed so quickly that people are leaving. But we're slowly getting through that, getting things cleaned up.
How's the wait time at the green waste?
As of Saturday, again, the first couple of days, it was kind of long. The wait time got long. We're sorry. Again, we have a big just dirt area that we use as overflow, but it was so muddy from the snow the first couple of days we couldn't open it up because the equipment couldn't get there to push things and load. So after the first couple of days, they got a system down. For instance, on Saturday when the extended hours and knew it would be busy, we had some inmate labor come and help, so they were helping people unload to help it go faster. Again, it's been a combined effort, all hands on deck. Teresa and Emma and I came in Tuesday night to try and call those last 17 people that didn't have power on to offer them services at the Red Cross if they needed something, overnight or for a couple of days until power could be restored. So, we have amazing employees, and they really responded well. And you know, we've had some neighborhoods that organize cleanups to help their neighbors that maybe can't haul. That's, again, a huge help to us if neighbors can band together and deliver it to the landfill. So kudos to our employees, to our community, and please, if we've been out your street to clean it up, don't put more out, because now the streets department has to come around and do leaf cleanup. So when it gets to snow plowing for the winter, you know, they don't have impacts with branches and leaves and storm water and snow plowing. So that's the report there. The next item is not on the agenda, but I'd just like to update everyone on this, the Independent Redistricting Commission. Every 10 years, the state is mandated, because of the census, they have to reset all the boundaries for the congressional, the state senate, the state house, and state school board districts to equalize the populations. There's very specific formulas, and they want public opinion. They have some draft maps there, but, you know, they said, we can't think of everything. They try to base it on natural boundaries or communities of interest or what makes sense. Logan City itself is larger than can be included in one house Senate district, even one house state house district. So where do you divide Logan as far as representation? So the address is UIRC, which stands for Utah Independent Redistricting Commission. We put information about it on the city website. UIRC.utah.gov. They'd love to have your input. They do have to have a report to the legislature, I think by the 1st of November. So don't wait too long to do it. You have a chance to provide input. And Amy attended as well. She picked up this lovely t-shirt, a great t-shirt. So what other comments do you have, Amy?
So I just want, to me, I'll just say that given this impacts Logan City's representation at a statewide level, it was a little disheartening. Actually, the whole county was a little disheartening. There were only maybe 24, 25 people that were in attendance, that were there to hear and to weigh in and to give input to the committee. It's a much more complicated process, I will say, than I acknowledged, that I realized. So, for example, the congressional districts have to have 817,904 residents, and the deviation on that can only be 817 people. So when they're drawing the congressional boundaries, and it all has to be by census tract as well, so if they move it over a block, it can mean like that difference. So it's a pretty complex process. So as you go to their website and look at their maps, I would say just have a little grace and mercy, especially with those congressional ones, because of how small that variance is. For the state senate here, for us though, it's a 5,000 person variance. For the state house, it's 2,000, and for the state school district boundaries, it's 10,000. The maps are really interesting to look at, and I would encourage you. One basically kind of cuts all the way across the middle of Cache County. So a representative would be from Mendon, Logan, and all the way that way. There's others where it's just Logan. So I think the input that they're looking for isn't just change the map, it's what do you think about this? How do you think this will impact you? So if you think about the city of Logan, as you look at those seats, is it better to have 2 representatives, because we'll have to have 2, one from one larger area and one from a smaller one, or 2 of equal size? So those are all things and questions that I think we need to weigh in on, because the members of this redistricting aren't necessarily speaking for us. So I would encourage everybody to go and take a look at it.
But they are independent. Again, they just make a recommendation to the legislature. The legislature can choose to do what they want, but again, it's very well balanced, and they've been all over the state trying to do a good job. So, and then the last quick item, the city is a co-sponsor of the Halloween Festival on Center Street. We'll be closing the street that afternoon, have contests. There'll be the Hocus Pocus Witches dance under the archway several different times during the night. So you can see information on that on the city website. And with that, I will turn the time back. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Vice Chair Simmons, give us an update on the Planning Commission, please.
Yes, on the 14th, Planning Commission reviewed 2 projects. One is another facility at the Blue Springs Business Park, which you know is at 10th North and 10th West, around that area, between 6th and 10th North, between 6th and 10th West on 10th North. The other one is another design review for a steel building, a 5,000 square foot steel building on 1210 West, 600 North.
Great, thank you so much.
I think that's all. Hold on. I better make sure. No, that's all.
Okay. Very good, thank you. Amy, you have a report for us?
Do. So every year, the Utah League of Cities and Towns holds an annual convention, and since Logan City is a member, the mayor and city council members are invited to attend that. So Mayor Deans was there, Councilman Jensen and I also attended. And I just wanted to give a couple of highlights of some of the things that were covered, some of the things that are available to us as opportunities to learn. So some of these sessions that both Tom and I attended more dealt with housing. That was a big focus of this session. Understandably, housing is an issue across the entire state. So one of the interesting sessions I attended, one was called Why Not in My Backyard? That kind of addressed the need to build more housing, and kind of said that when it comes to adding new units in cities or neighborhoods, some become less enthusiastic. So it kind of addressed all of our attitudes towards growth and opposition, and how to be better listeners and to talk about housing development so that it can be something that we all value and appreciate. There's a new term that you might hear, which is called missing middle housing. This is the latest buzzword, and Ernesto, I think they talked about this at the conference you were at as well. But this is a type of housing that is buildings with multiple units. So talking about compatibility in scale and form with single detached family homes, but in adding in duplexes, fourplexes, cottage courts, and courtyard buildings to try to create more diverse housing in what were traditionally single-family neighborhoods. So a very interesting concept. It's something that's really missing from stock in Utah, especially because these types of homes, you might see them in older sections of Salt Lake, but they were pretty much banned across the state in the 40s. So it's not something that we typically see now in communities around the state. One of the comments they made is that we should all ask around and see if our aunts have memories of living in a fourplex, or if we remember visiting our grandma in a duplex. So just kind of trying to remind us of how communities were built and how those ideas that kind of may fell out of favor might resonate again today as we're facing some of these housing crises. So keep that term in mind, missing middle housing. And then we also looked at mixed-use development and how the goal is to develop those pedestrian-friendly developments with residential, commercial, cultural, institutional, or even industrial uses. So just a great opportunity to meet with other city leaders to hear what solutions they're employing and how we can all grow better communities and provide the services that are needed for our citizens. The last thing I wanted to talk about the Utah League was there were only a couple of resolutions for voting members, and I think a resolution that to me was pretty important was one that's called the Love, Listen, Lead. And so in 2020, ULCT and the Utah Chiefs of Police Association made a commitment to both public safety and the general public by creating Love, Listen, Lead, which was a task force of police chiefs, elected officials, attorneys, managers from Utah municipalities, and the public from all sizes and geographic regions to talk about potential policy proposals on public safety throughout our communities. Their objective was to find a space where both the Utah League and the Utah Chiefs of Police Association could identify that they support police officers, but also identify areas where we could improve community trust. At think we all saw, you know, in the wake of some of the nationwide protests, that there is distrust out there, especially amongst Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So this commission was put together, and they came and brought a resolution to the Utah League of Cities and Towns. And some of the highlights of that was just to identify the support that Utah state leaders and state and municipal leaders and law enforcement agencies should continue to strive to foster communities in which everybody feels safe, supported, and respected. We should establish opportunities to recruit and retain police officers who serve their communities with honor and valor while enhancing the dignity and equality of all community members. It goes on to talk about some of the research that was done that shows that there are definitely trust gaps, particularly differences in opinion from residents who are white and the Black, Indigenous, and persons of color community, and also between age groups. So older adults tend to have a different feeling and trust in the police than younger groups. So just kind of looking at those gaps, what can we do to help improve those, to talk about public safety policies, to talk about use of force policies, and to ensure that all policy proposals keep these standards in mind. So the City of Logan did vote for this, so as we move forward in looking at ordinances related to law enforcement and our police officers who do a fabulous job for us, that we keep these ideals in mind. So that is my report on Utah League. And then just real quickly, one other thing, we will all be participating in the homecoming parade on Saturday. So
Not all.
Jeannie will be gone. What? Out of town.
I'll be out of town.
So now it's gonna be rain, right? Actually, that would be really nice because you're not gonna be there.
Any questions for Amy about her report? I have a question for the mayor off the top of your head. How many units do we have that are coming online in the next 2 years between all projects? I mean,
You mean housing?
yeah, housing units, yeah. How many units between Homestead and L59 and Mill Creek and Mill Creek 2 and
I can't tell you off the top of my head. I can have staff check and email that to you.
Mike might be able to tell you.
Can you guess, Mike?
Yes, I can put it together for you and send it to you. Probably 1,200 to 1,500 units that have been approved, yet probably haven't been permitted.
Okay, 12 to 1,500.
Not all of them have been constructed yet.
I think that's our best bet on pushing pricing down is to have an overabundance of units.
And I think the issue is we can plan for it, we can approve it, but ultimately we can't, we're not.
No, we
necessarily
can't build it, but 1,200 units in the next 2 years will make a difference. I think that's great.
So can I add something? And I've shared this in a couple of the forums lately, but coming back from the One Utah Summit, it was mentioned that the state itself is short about 50,000 units, and we cannot build them fast enough to keep up with the demand. So hopefully, the 12 to 1,500 will help.
That's our little
Did they say, Ernesto, that those were single-family housing units or multifamily housing units, or did they distinguish?
They did not distinguish between them.
Because I know that there has been a great deal of discussion about the fact that we are short, extremely short on single-family housing. But I don't know where that percentage falls.
I participated in the Utah League legal call. Is that what it is? What committee is that on Monday? LPC, Legislative Policy Committee, which is starting to look at potential legislation coming to legislators this January. There's going to be a flurry of activity on housing things, so we'll make sure that everybody is kept up to date on that. But just like the accessory dwelling unit legislation that came through, those things do have an impact on Logan City as far as our zoning goes and as far as our ability to address things. So we'll make sure everybody's up to date on what potential legislation might be coming around.
There was also a mention of, I think, a fund, a $30 million fund that the legislature approved to help with denser housing in some areas. as well as, I think, near,
Transit.
transit areas.
Yeah. Which we don't really have.
We don't qualify for it. I mean, the Cashel Transit Center isn't considered in that category. It's rail.
Let's do that.
It's mostly geared toward the Wasatch Front.
Which is where most of the legislators live, just saying.
Thank you for the input and comments, and for the report.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to our action items. First up, we have Resolution 21-51, a budget adjustment. Rich Anderson.
A few items to consider. First is a request to appropriate $600,000 of committed radio funds in our 911 fund for the purchase of P25 radios and the system upgrade. Request to appropriate $19,500 in grant funds received from the state for EMS supplies. $250,000 Parks and Rec after school program grant. We receive these each year. And lastly, $116,010 to true up our CDBG allocation from the federal government for the fiscal year 22.
And you said last time that was a little extra.
A little bit more. We always try to undershoot it so that we're not coming back and reducing it. That's a little more painful.
Very nice. Very nice. Any questions for Rich before we open? All right. This is a public hearing, so this is your opportunity to speak on Resolution 21-51 budget adjustment. Now is your opportunity. If you'd like to address the council. Again, name, where you live, and 3 minutes or less, please.
Dr. Gail Gilst. I live here in Logan on First East. And we had a lot of tree limbs come down, but we did have several young men from the university come, and they were willing to get paid to help, and they really made a difference. It was worth it, since my husband has a really bad back and couldn't have done it all himself. So we appreciated those young men. I have a question about the Parks and Rec after school program. Why just those 4 schools? Are the school programs, I understand, are in all the schools. So why just those 4 schools for this amount? And why not share with the other 2 schools in the school district? And that's my question.
Great question. Thank you. Is that something you can address, Russ?
Yeah.
Jeannie, you have a comment?
No.
Okay.
I didn't know Russ was here. Working in the wrong spot. Usually sits right over there.
Thank you,
You were
Russ.
sitting in the wrong place.
Sorry, keep you guessing. All 6 schools receive funding. This is through the Department of Workforce Services, but they're on different tracks. And so as the funding comes, all of the schools get to participate. So they are all on even keel, they just come in different increments.
Thank you for the answer, Russ. Great question. All right, not seeing any other questions, let's bring it back to the council for action, please.
I would move approval of Resolution 21-51.
I'll second that.
All right, Resolution 21-51 has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Resolution carries. Our next public hearing is for Ordinance 21-22, code amendments for some of our neighborhood residential uses. Mike, you're up.
We went through this last time. Do you want me to go through real briefly again?
Briefly would be great, please.
Okay. Set up.
We have received emails, so thank you for those who have sent emails in. We did receive those. I read all of them, responded to multiples of them, but we appreciate your input. There were some for our resolution and some that did not care much for it as well too. So we appreciate that input. It helps us in making our decisions. And I personally weigh the emails as much as someone speaking here personally. So, like everybody feels that way, but that's worth saying something. So,
Teresa, how do we turn this on?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay, this is from the workshop from last time. We'll go through it real briefly. We've got a proposed code amendment, 4 different sections, 1708, 11, 37, 62. And really what this is for urban agriculture. So what we're proposing to do is establish minimum standards for keeping domestic livestock, fowl, chickens, bees in residential areas.
Which we do not currently have.
Correct. So what we propose is to clarify the distinction in types of ag. So we currently have a definition of ag that's fairly broad. It includes things from like a dairy, a feedlot, all the way down to Jeannie raising a chicken in her backyard. It's currently allowed in certain residential areas, in NR2, NR4, but that's about it. What we want to do is provide standards that would balance the rights and desires of people who want to raise animals versus those who don't want anything next door to them. So kind of the background is we've got this is our Logan Municipal Code. This is the definition of that under animal control. And this tells you that if you're going to do animals for family food production, it defaults back to our land use ordinances and regulations. So it really defaults back to our land development code. And the definition of, or how we define animals for family food production is chickens, bees, livestock, things like that. So people will call them their pets. We don't refer to them as pets, we refer to them as animals for family food production.
Do we have a definition for pets?
We do, I'm sure we do.
It's housebroken and
Yeah.
cuddly.
I mean, you can have a python that's a pet, right?
Some people might find that cuddly.
Yes.
So reptiles do not fall in my pet category, but I'm sure they do for a lot of other people. So.
And so the way we work, if it's not expressly permitted in a specific zone, then it's expressly prohibited. And this is our current definition under our land development code. And this has been around, when I kind of went back through the record, this has been around since about 2000. That's when we went from the old zoning ordinance and styles of code to a newer code. And this is kind of what came out of that. But basically, it's got that wide range of agricultural uses. And again, it's the traditional types of animals that are kept for utility purposes. So when you look at our use charts, ag uses are permitted in the NR2, NR4, and the RC zones. And that's in the areas up on Cliffside, Hillcrest. There's a few others in town that are NR4, they've got bigger lots. And the RC zones are out on the periphery. They're also prohibited in the NR6 zones and the MR zones. That's pretty much the bulk of our zoning. They're permitted on the industrial side or the commercial side in the gateway, commercial services, industrial, and then AP zone. So if you notice on the west side of town, we've got some existing ag land that's still in use over there. So we've been asked, why are we doing this? Why now? 7 years ago, chickens were kind of in vogue. People were doing this, and a lot of jurisdictions adopted some standards because people wanted to put chickens in their yards. The city at that time said, you know what, it's not on our radar. Let's not worry about it. But as we've gone through enforcement action, we get a lot of inquiries about, can I raise animals in my yard? We don't have a good answer for them. We don't have any standards. And then looking back through the record, really, it's not permitted. So that's one of the problems. But we're trying to minimize complaints about neighboring animals. We're trying to minimize complaints about nuisance activities, odors, things like that. But the challenge behind all this is we're trying to make a rule that's black and white when you apply it in a variety of different situations. When you look at Logan, we've got some bigger lots in the older part of town that are a quarter to a half acre that are probably appropriate, yet they're a block off of Main Street, versus up on Cliffside or Hillcrest or other subdivisions that probably are not appropriate. So I pointed this out last time. This is what we have, a current pending situation. It's a small lot near the hospital, 6,000 square feet. This gentleman wants to raise 10 goats, 10 chickens, and 10 ducks. When you look at the size of these lots, it's probably not appropriate for that level of intensity, right? You've got neighbors that are within 25 feet of each other, small yards, and it comes down to, if I want to choose to live there, I should have the right to live there within my own confines without impacting anybody else, and vice versa. So looking at what everybody else does, that's how we usually start, is what does everybody else do? We go from there. But what we've found are the common elements in all ordinances that regulate animals is establishing to see what's appropriate. So this is really a zoning issue and not necessarily an animal issue per se. You look at the size of the number of animals, you relate it to a lot size or land area, because that's easily a way to do the math. You look at setbacks to adjoining property lines, adjoining buildings, adjoining homes. You look at where it's appropriate on the property, enclosure, sanitation, and then some of the nuisance issues, roosters, permits, slaughtering. And we've chosen not to require permits. A lot of jurisdictions do say you need to get a permit for chickens, and we don't want to do that. Because it's just a waste of everybody's time to get a permit to have chickens. That's why. So here's how we rank, or I guess compare with the rest of most jurisdictions in the valley, and Hyde Park, Hiram, Mendham, Nibley, North Logan, Providence, Richmond, River Heights, Smithfield, Wellsville. That's what I've looked at. I can find their code relatively easy online, and you can see that they've all come out with some numeric standards based on minimum lot sizes. And most of them say you can do it in a residential zone. There are a couple out there that don't have any standards. Providence, for example, is one. My guess is they will eventually have standards.
So it's the SFR, means single family residence.
That's correct, yeah. And then looking at other communities in the state, try to pick like or similar communities from a population standpoint. You can see the list we've got here, and generally these do require, some maximum numbers based on lot size. So this is what we came up with after it went through the Planning Commission. Again, it's based on this notion of urban agriculture. It's food production within an urban area on a scale that is for personal use and consumption, compatible with the neighborhood. And this is what we've proposed. You can see the ranking of lot size relative to the number of chickens. We did get some feedback at the first two public hearings we had on it. This is what we came up with. We prefer to see it in the side of the rear yard with a coop or some kind of enclosure. And you need to be at least 25 feet from adjoining dwellings and adjoining lots, just to keep the odors and the noise away from those folks. Keep it clean and sanitary. No roosters, geese, or peacocks, and that's obviously because of noise. We had turkeys on the original list. The Planning Commission suggested we take that off because they're not as noisy.
What happened with ducks?
What's that?
What happened with ducks?
Ducks, they're included just as we regulate chickens.
They're included as if they were chickens? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
And then we've got a provision for no outdoor slaughtering in the front or side yard.
Okay.
Turkeys and ducks fall under the chicken clause.
That's correct.
You can outdoor slaughter something in your backyard
Yes,
if you're in an NR6 zone?
that's what's proposed.
Okay.
The other element we dealt with is beekeeping, and this one we got some feedback from local beekeepers, and we tried to be cognizant of some of those requirements. But again, we look at other ordinances, and these are things that are common. Where's it appropriate in the city? You've got to register with the State Department of Ag. Number of hives are tied to a lot size or land area, setbacks, location of property, sanitation. Water availability is important, and then also a flyaway barrier. So what we came up with in a proposal in front of you folks is basically that. It's got to be conducted in conjunction with a single-family dwelling. Got to register with the Department of Ag. The beehive number is tied to a minimum lot size with a caveat that says if you've got a lot that backs up to a natural area or an open area, you can get away from that lot size because they've got room to fly as opposed to being stuck in a neighborhood. Fenced yard, side or rear property, setback from adjoining dwellings, provide some water within their seasons, March to October, I believe. Then the flyaway barriers to direct those bees on a flight path out of their hives once they leave. Miniature livestock, small goats, sheep, pigs, miniature horses, again tied to minimum lot sizes, fenced yards, shelter, pen required, minimum setbacks, health and sanitation standards, no slaughtering in front or side yards. And again, you can slaughter in the backyard if you prefer, Jeannie. And then permitted with a single family dwelling in these 3 zones, or 4 zones. Larger livestock, again, tied to lot size, kind of the same standards as the miniature livestock. And community agriculture. So this is those gardens or ag areas that are generally run through a CSA type where you buy into a membership and you get produce on a weekly basis. Smaller market gardens where you might grow pumpkins in your backyard and sell them in your front yard. And then we have a definition of urban ag. Again, that's that urban scale type of ag. Here's some proposed use charts. So 1708, 1711, we've proposed that you could do these two types of ag, community and urban ag, in any zone, because again, it's tied to a single family dwelling. And then we've limited the agricultural uses to just the RC zones. And then in the commercial use chart, it's the same thing going across the board. Again, but it's tied to a single family dwelling. And I had questions, but I also threw in the stuff that I sent to you guys as well. This is a copy of the use table from one of the old codes. And this dates back into the 70s, and it was kind of a holdover up and through the 90s. And it shows you obviously where we permitted keeping animals for family food production under certain zones. So it was the R1A, R2A, R3A, and then the ag zone. And the irony is that the R1A, 2A, and 3A zones were also multifamily zones. That's why we were pushing that middle housing, the fourplexes that we see that people seem to love so much.
What does the S stand for?
What's that?
The S.
S was a special use permit.
Okay.
Here's the old zoning from 94, and I apologize for the clarity. It's really hard to copy these things, but where you see these two green arrows, this is generally where those were permitted. So on the west side of town, you could build a fourplex and raise bees. And this is kind of the precursor to our current use table. Again, the definition of agricultural is what we have now. So this is from 2000, and it didn't allow any kind of ag uses other than in the ag zone. And then animal slaughtering was prohibited throughout the entire residential areas. Back to
Thank you.
So, did have a provision though, one of the footnotes said, default to nonconformity uses. So, with that, be happy to answer any questions. Or
This is much less restrictive than what we used to have.
yeah, really, when we talked about this last time, we were trying to figure out what a nonconformity date would be, and looking at the animal control ordinance that was adopted in 2019, but in looking backwards beyond that, really, the change from ag allowance was done around 2000. So up to about the late 90s to 2000, you could have agricultural uses in your yards, but at 2000, the city made a decision, whoever was in charge, that they just weren't allowed anymore.
So currently, NR2 and NR4, you could have animals in your yard. So I'm just trying to be clear that ordinance, the way it's written, it's not allowing it in a place that it wasn't. It's more restricting it in places where it used to be allowed. Am I interpreting that correctly?
It's also allowing it in areas where it was not allowed.
Yes. So the current definition of ag and those wide range of uses are permitted in the NR2 and NR4 zones.
Already,
Currently, that's correct. So up in Hillcrest, I could put in a feedlot. Not likely, but I could do it, right? But in the bulk of the city that's zoned NR4 or some of the multifamily zones, you currently can't have animals. So the proposal is to kind of switch that around so that it's really applicable across the entire city, but it's tied to a single family dwelling, and there's some limitations, so basically some parameters on the extended uses.
And again, if you have an ongoing use, it would be grandfathered in. I mean, we have a dairy farm within our city limits, as the city is well around it, and it's just fine until the use changes, they're allowed to do that.
That's correct.
There was an email that came through talking about the numbers of chickens. I noticed that there was only one chicken increase between 5,000 and 6,000 through 10,000. To me, it seems a little weird that 6,000 will allow 5 chickens, and in my mind,
1 chicken per 1,000 square feet.
I mean, if that was the logic, why wouldn't we allow more chickens up to 10,000?
Because you had to pick a number somewhere. And this is what fell out of the tree. Well, I mean, again, we looked at...
You can change it if you want.
Yeah, you can change it. Again, we looked at other jurisdictions and tried to not necessarily mirror what they were doing, but on the smaller lots, and we have some areas that have 4,000 square foot lots. So at some point you got to say, what's the appropriate carrying capacity of 4,000 square foot lots for animals? And sure, there's probably not a huge difference between 5 chickens and 6 chickens, but again, you gotta draw a line somewhere. There's always a line in the sand that's good or bad.
So if someone is in a, just for my own understanding, if someone lives in a lot that is smaller than 6,000 square feet, if we pass this, what livestock can they have in their yard?
Just chickens.
Just chickens.
It's generally just chickens. I'm assuming that it's in an area that's got the similar sized lots next to them. So really what it comes down to is they may not even get chickens if the lots are, if the houses are fairly tight and close and there's not a huge yard in the back, because you've got to have a 25-foot setback from adjoining dwellings. And if you
From
want to,
any side or all sides?
from wherever you want to place like a chicken pen or a coop or whatever. So
So-
backwards and sideways.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you could only put it in the backyard and it would have to be 25 feet from your house or 25 feet from the house behind
The
you?
The
adjoining.
adjoining,
So you'd have to have at least a 50-foot wide lot if you put it in the middle
Right.
of your property. And it had to be a really skinny coop.
Very narrow,
Gotta
1
be-
foot wide.
multi-level. Yeah, so it's got to be in a fenced yard on the side or the rear of the house. And then again, it's got to be 25 feet back from an adjoining dwelling on an adjoining lot. And that's for just domestic fowl. The bees, it's 50 feet, or I'm sorry, 25 feet from adjoining dwellings. It's this one right here. And then for livestock, it's 50 feet.
And it's a dwelling, not the property line.
Correct.
So the side yard counts. Okay.
That's correct.
Bees are just cleaner. Chickens.
Do we have a count of how many residences have any of this, like chickens and livestock? We don't.
Based on the comments we've got, it seems like everybody has them, but I really don't know. And we don't get a ton of complaints, it's just the random weird ones that we get. But again, we do get a lot of inquiries from folks who want to do it, and we don't really have a good response. What we tell them is it's currently not legal, but if you get along with your neighbors and you share whatever your eggs and stuff, people don't really care, don't create a problem, but that's not always the right answer.
Well, and I think that it's important for people to understand that we're not going to go chicken hunting to count your chickens in your backyard. But if there's a complaint, we have a basis upon which to enforce.
Right.
So it's not like we're gonna go chicken hunting.
And part of the problem with relying strictly on nuisance types of standards is it's like a noise issue. It's very fleeting. You can have a dog barking for an hour, code enforcement shows up, the dog's inside.
Right.
So it's at least if you have a default standard, you can at least work with the person and say, look, here's the problems we see that we are.
But if somebody complains that you've got 15 chickens and 5 roosters and they're making noise all the time and it's really obnoxious, and then code enforcement goes, the 15 chickens and 5 roosters are probably there.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it allows us to enforce rather than, we're not policing, we just want to enforce if there are complaints.
Did we talk at all with like a vet or somebody just to kind of see if the numbers made sense?
No, but we did look at about 40 other jurisdictions to see what they do, and I figured if Nibley has standards, then we should have some standards, or Richmond, everybody kind of looks at everybody else, and I don't know if I'm assuming there's an appropriate square footage of land for one animal, but if you look at commercial chicken growers, they stack a box the size of this screen with 4 to 6 birds because that's all they do is lay eggs. So.
This USU Extension might be able to share some information.
Yeah, but really, it gets back down to it's a land use issue of really what's appropriate in the residential area.
It's interesting, Ernesto, like Harriman doesn't allow any chickens in under 5,000, and Brigham City only allows 2 in under 7,000. So we could change that if you thought it was more logical.
So if I'm reading this correctly, as far as large animals go, if you want a cow, if you're on a 20,000 square foot lot,
you can have one cow, because it's 15,000 square feet per cow. Am I reading the code right on that?
20,000 square feet, you got at least 20,000 square feet of lot size
But you have to have at least 15,000 square feet per cow.
of land area available, yes.
So you couldn't have 2 cows on a 20,000 square foot lot. Because
Right.
that would only be.
I'm not sure you can have one if you have a house.
How many
Well-
acres is
No, it's the square footage of the lot, not the available square footage, is the way I was reading it. Am I reading that incorrectly?
But
If
do
you
you
have a
have,
20,000 square foot lot, you don't have to have 15,000 square feet of land available, you just have to have the 20,000 square foot lot, correct?
And I'm not voting on this, obviously, but I've been at enough farmers to know that cows smell a lot different than the other animals.
That's the one I questioned. Yeah, that's why I figured it out.
I grew up having
so do you have to have 15,000 square foot per feet
No.
per cow?
No, it's, so for large livestock, if you look on the proposed ordinance 1737-110B, B1, so 3 standard goat, sheep, or similarly sized livestock are allowed on lots 10,000 square feet or greater. 1 additional animal is allowed for each additional 10,000 square feet. So your baseline is 3 per 10,000. And then the next one is 1 horse, cow, llama, or similarly sized livestock is allowed on lots 20,000 square feet or greater. 1 additional animal is allowed for each additional 20,000 square feet.
Okay, so I guess in the minutes, there was something about 15, never mind.
And some of the lots in, the older parts of town, the old grid system, we've got lots that are half acre in size. And we have dealt with this. We've had a complaint, somebody on the island that had a couple of cows, a couple of goats, a couple of sheep, and we thought, what's the problem, Oh, obviously, there's an issue with the odor and the manure waste, things like that.
My neighbor's got 3 horses, but they also have 6 acres.
Yeah.
And they're grandfathered in, so they
Yeah,
can
they've been
continue to have.
We used to have cattle at my parents' house. They got 1.5 acres. We had 2 cows regularly.
You
Used to
build cows.
Used to have a dairy.
There used to be cattle at the Stewart Nature Park, that used to be cows.
I never milked the cows, but we would name them. Okay, any other questions for Mike before we open this up? All right, this is a public hearing, ordinance 21-22. If you'd like to speak concerning this ordinance, your opportunity is now. Please state your name, where you live, and try and keep it to 3 minutes or less.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Timmons. I live in the Hillcrest area. Earlier today, I sent an email out to the mayor and council, and I know several of you have read it based on feedback that I received, and I don't intend to reread the contents of that letter. First off, I want to apologize for coming forward so late in this process. I'm kind of Johnny-come-lately. My first awareness of this whole issue was a chance review or preview of the minutes I received for tonight's meeting last week, and I was broadsided. I live in a shell. I don't get the Herald Journal. I didn't know that the zoning, planning and zoning was considering this and that it had been previously discussed. So I apologize for that because obviously staff and the planning and zoning group have put a lot of work into it to this point. I'm surprised. I was very surprised by Mike's presentation and reading through some of the literature that I've always assumed that animal controls are in place in Logan. That's been an assumption of mine forever, except for the grandfather areas that we've talked about. And it's clear that regulations are necessary. So the idea of moving forward with some kind of regulations makes a lot of sense. And I'm not opposed to really small-scale chicken coops of 5 or 6 chickens and maybe a beehive. I don't know much about apiaries and bee nuisances and things. But to my sense, the ordinance as drafted has gone way overboard, allowing what I would refer to as mini farms, particularly when we get into 20,000 square foot lots or larger. and to introduce this use in established neighborhoods where folks have bought into a neighborhood assuming, rightly or wrongly, that they're not going to be surrounded by barnyard uses per se, smacks me as being wrong and backward. I've focused on 20,000 square foot lots, 0.46 acres, just because it seems like there's such a quantum leap in things that are permissible. By my reading of this, and I checked this with Mike last week, on a 20,000 square foot or larger lot, I could have, and I do have a lot, 20,000 square feet, I can have 15 chickens or other domestic fowl and or rabbits, they're in that same category, 6 beehives, 4 miniature livestock, goats, sheep, pigs, 4 standard goats or sheep, and 1 cow or horse. On my lot, which is surrounded by smaller lots right next to the playground in Lundstrom Park, and I frankly find that astonishing. I did a map that I attached to the email that I sent to all of you. I took the ArcGIS plat maps for Logan City. The audience, I'm sorry, can't see this because it's blue and there's little red dots. But I put a dot on every lot that's 20,000 square feet or larger. And this is approximate, but by my count, there are 54 lots in the Hillcrest neighborhood alone that would qualify for this. Obviously, not all of those 54 people are going to go out and start a mini farm, but it only takes a few, it only takes 3 or 4 to change the entire quality of our neighborhood. And rather than waking up to songbirds chirping in the morning, we'll be waking up to goats and cows and other kinds of rural sounds. I'd like to think that the council would look out for our property values in making this decision, avoiding the stench and other flies and other things that would come with cows and other critters. And I guess to summarize, simply put, I did not choose my neighborhood so that I could live next door to a barnyard. I would have lived in some other place if that was my choice. So thank you very much for listening to me. Am I supposed to sign something? You said something about signing in. Oh, it's outside. Okay, I'll catch it later.
Thank you.
I'm Kim Johansson, I'm in Logan. I would first like to, I was here last time and I appreciate the correspondence I've had with Mike clarifying some of the numbers and the reasons, and I do appreciate it. I would like to turn to this gentleman. I would love to live next to a mini farm. I do, and I love it. Absolutely. It warms my heart. We want to be sustainable. That's how I want to raise my kids, to be able to responsibility, go out, take care of the chickens. I didn't move to Salt Lake. I didn't move to a big city to have the noise of traffic. I wanted to move, well, it was my husband's job, but in response to the chickens, I would like to see more input from a vet from USU Extension, because the numbers, in my opinion, are still too small for the lot sizes. And as far as mini livestock, my miniature goat is the size of a Labrador Retriever. And he is quiet, more quiet than a dog. And it's hard. It's hard when you do become emotionally attached to these animals. He does cuddle. If I sit down in a chair, he will jump up on my lap. And he loves me and I love him. I have 2 goats. But there's no requirement size for Labrador Retrievers or Great Danes. They can live in apartments. And so my mini goat, it's 9,134 square feet. So I'm just under. And it's, again, you're not gonna go policing, although I do wanna take a tape measure out because I swear it's a little bit bigger than that. I swear. And I've tried to look up so many documents and in our records, and it's just under. But they're quieter than dogs, and we take care of them, and so it's hard to distinguish. They're just livestock. He is a pet, and my children have the responsibility. She goes out and checks the eggs, she feeds them, she brushes them, we clean up every week. We have a checklist in that. So I would say if we can be more generous with the chicken sizes versus lot size, I would love to see that, and then hopefully get some input from more experts. So yes, the numbers. Let's go back to those numbers. You would hope that a city, so we're just copy and paste in a sense. We're gaining those numbers off of what other cities have done. Why can't we be a little different, saying our numbers are backed by research? And yes, it comes down to zoning. So in the city, you're not supposed to have chickens. Don't have chickens because you're in a city. But I would say we're different. We're not Salt Lake. We're not these big cities. We're Logan. We started as an ag culture. We started as an ag community. And I feel like we're getting away from it. We don't want to be the next. Maybe we do. I don't know. I don't want to be the next Salt Lake. And so for me, I love the fact that we can have the chickens or that we could have the goats, because it's about sustaining your own family, that I don't have to go to the grocery store. My kids are learning this. If, I don't know, heaven forbid, they could be considered food supply. If the world was ending, I wouldn't go that far. They're food storage if you want to go that far. But it's about I can have that. That is a wonderful, beautiful thing, and I feel like we're getting away from that, if you will, in a sense of, I don't know. I really feel like our city could be different, and that we can embrace the fact that we are an ag community. And I would just like to see more wiggle room with those amounts of chickens. And I'm going to get a tape measure and for sure measure my lot, because I'm not just under. So thank you for listening to me, and I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's up there.
Luann Sockakey, Logan. I just have a quick question about grandfathering. If a person has always kept, for example, 2 horses and it was allowed because of their huge lot size, but they don't currently have horses, does that mean they've lost their grandfathering? I don't know what to call it.
Can you answer that, Mike?
Depends. So we've got some subdivisions in Logan that were created with the understanding of animals. So Equestrian Estates was created with that concept. I live in the front, I have animals in the back. That's where we've said that'll be grandfathered. And we need to confirm the date of, is 2000 the right date of when we go back? So if you've had animals prior to 2000 and it carries forward and you don't cease the use there for longer than 12 months, then you would be grandfathered. But if you have horses for a year, then they aren't horses for 10 years, and you bring it back, then in theory you wouldn't have any grandfather. That makes sense? Yeah. To establish a nonconformity, you just can't give that up. You can't choose to do it sporadically. It's 12 months is the window on a use.
Okay, so if longer than 12 months, then you've lost your grandfather.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. Now it's clear.
So does that affect also changing in property owners?
It doesn't. It's regardless of property ownership.
It's the actual time.
Right. So if I buy a dairy that's been there for 50 years and I continue that, then I'm lawfully permitted to do that as a non-conforming use if the zoning changes. But if I cease using that as a dairy for 12 months or longer, then I lose that right.
Great. Thank you for the question and the answer.
Gail Yost, I live on First East, just a block away from the red. I have a similar question. My deed, when we first bought the house, our deed said we had animal rights. It's 1/4 of an acre. We haven't had anything more than cats or dogs, and I'm not worried about that so much. As that one young woman said about the mini goats, we have been thinking about having that because they keep the weeds and grass down. And they usually make very good pets. Not sure my dogs would like it, but I'm just wondering how far back does that go when the original deed talks about animal rights in it, and it's a quarter of an acre. So obviously it was an NR4 area at the time.
Great question. Deed use.
Look at the attorney, I don't know.
I think the answer would be that if you're not utilizing those animal rights, you don't have animals currently, you would not have a grandfathered use.
Even though it's on your deed.
Even though it's on your deed. It's an option that you have to have those animals based on that deed, to put those animal rights. But if you're not utilizing it, it wouldn't be grandfathered in.
Okay. All right, very good. Great question. Thank you for the answer.
Hi, my name is Austin. I live by the high school in 360 South 100 West. And I have chickens, and I'm against the law of there being a certain amount of chickens and the amount of square feet of your yards. And
Just read it.
I love my chickens, and that's why I'm here tonight. All of my chickens have names, and they are family to me. I have learned about taking care of someone else besides myself. I help feed, water, and take care daily for my chickens. I can even help with the things that aren't as fun, like cleaning out their coops. I know if I help clean out their coops, it helps them be more healthier. I also get to take eggs to some of my neighbors. I am scared if this law passes that I will lose some of my best friends who I spend time with and cuddle with every day. I know we have more chickens than you say is going to be okay, I can't say goodbye to any of them because I love them all, and when I'm having a bad day, my chickens are there to help me feel better. My dog died this summer, and I was really sad. And if this law does pass, then I won't have anything. So me, my mom, and my dad, and my sister, and everyone else I know that has chickens are against it. And when you get back your chickens, they're so cute, and raising them is the best. Please don't take away my chickens and everyone else's chickens.
Thank you, Austin. Very courageous.
My name is Laverna Horn. I live in the island area. I really appreciate the work that Mike has gone to with trying to find a balance between making sure that those who would like to have animals in the backyard, whether it be feathers or stingers or fur or whatever, that is as fair and equitable as you can have. It's not an easy balance to find. I actually was in email correspondence with Mike about some of the beekeeping suggestions and refinements that he made, and I thought was very appreciative of the questions that he asked. With regards to the chickens, I have some concerns about it because with a backyard flock, it's kind of a gray area between livestock and pets. A lot of people who have a small flock will name their chickens. When they die, it's an awful thing for the kids to have to go through. And so I think that as we are kind of looking at these numbers, it's important to keep in mind that people who have backyard flocks are looking to have both eggs for their family and also to have a pet. And it's a hard thing to ask a person to say, well, do you want eggs or do you want a pet? Because a hen will lay the most eggs the first year that it starts to lay. And then the second year it decreases. And it keeps on going down and down and down each year. And so after about 3 or 4 years, your hen will not be laying much, but it will still have another 4 years of its life left. And so as I'm looking at the number, I have 0.24 acres, which is just over 10,000 square feet. I currently have 8 chickens, and it is substantial. Like the amount of eggs that I'm getting is reasonable. I have 4 kids, and that's like a number that I'm comfortable with. But all of my hens are between 1 and 2 years old, and as they get older, that number will decrease. And granted, I mean, not all hens will live to be 8 years old. I mean, we lost a few because we had a dog that somehow managed to jump over a 6-foot fence and took out a few of them, and that was really hard. But at the same time, you know, if the hen's not laying much, is it really livestock? Because it's not giving you eggs at all. But it would still count as a chicken because it is one. So I think with these numbers, it's kind of a hard, I have a little bit of a hard time with it because, you know, depending on what you're trying to get out of your backyard flock. I mean, some people just want to have cool looking birds and they don't care about the eggs. But a lot of people do care about how many eggs that they're getting, and that requires, you know, having enough of a critical mass, I guess, to have, you know, a few of your favorite old hens still sticking around, as well as some younger ones to keep that going. So I have no personal interest in goats. My family's lactose intolerant, and there's no desire there. And I'm happy with, you know, the 2 to 3 beehives that I keep. I'm wondering though, and the gentleman over here that had the concern about like 1 cow and 15 chickens and all of these things. I know that there's some cities that have a, like, you know, kind of like a ratio. You can have 1 cow or you can have 6 chickens or something like that. And so I'm wondering if things could be adjusted a little bit so that if I, who have no desire to have small livestock in my yard, if I could use that and get chickens, a few more chickens instead, you know what I mean? So
it's like bartering. You're gonna barter a small
bargaining, you know, like, I don't want the goats, I can have more chickens, right? So anyway, something like that I think would also solve a little bit of the problem with those who are concerned about having a barnyard in their backyard that's not theirs. And so instead of, you know, going with like this, you know, if you have this much space, you can only have this many animals, having more of like a, I don't know, some way of equalizing that a little bit. So if you don't want to have some of the other animals, perhaps you could have a few more chickens because it wouldn't necessarily be any more, you know, maintenance on your part in terms of keeping the smell down and everything like that. So, thanks.
Mike, I don't think the setbacks are going to take care of a lot of that.
Yeah, I think so. But
you don't want to have so many hens in this. You know.
Right. There's only so much room back there.
Yeah. Okay. Great comments. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andrea Sinfield. I too have some concerns about this, and I do appreciate the changes that were made from the last meeting, not restricting the pen sizes, which is nice. Thank you so much for that. But so I looked at some of the houses on the market that are under 6,000 square feet just to look at what lot sizes look like. I currently own 6 chickens, and it's just barely enough eggs for me, my husband, and my 3 kids, and they're under the age of 6. We love eggs at our house, and I cook with them, and it's just barely enough, and they are producing 1 a day. And so at some of these houses that I looked at in the market, under 6,000 square feet, if there was a family of 5 living in those houses and looking at the backyard, they would easily be able to have at least 6 chickens, but even more so than that, that would just barely be enough for for them if they want eggs. Most people have chickens for their eggs as a self-sufficiency thing. So maybe being more generous than, and I hate to ask for like, please let us have chickens. It sounds silly because I feel like it shouldn't even be this rule, but anyway, so I would say be more than generous on that. And first of all, how many of you have ever had chickens? Okay, so if you haven't had chickens and you haven't used that, then maybe take into account some of these people that really value that, a self-sufficiency, that, during COVID, I didn't have to go to the grocery store to get eggs. I could just go in my backyard and get my eggs, and that was wonderful. I love that so much. So looking at that, being an agricultural town, I feel like we should use a little more science in picking our numbers instead of just like whatever number drops from the tree. As far as lot size goes for some of these animals, because I currently have animals. I have an orchard, I have 2 ponies, 6 chickens, I have half an acre. It's beautiful, and you know what? It adds to the community. It brings people in. I've never seen people come to my yard and not want my yard, not love my yard. And I have people over all the time from all over the neighborhood. They love it. They love the animals, and it brings people together, in my opinion, especially if they're taking care of them properly, like I do. So I would suggest, if I can't prevent this, then at least be more generous for people and their chickens, and actually look at what some of these lot sizes look like and houses. Be more generous of, okay, their lot is different. Some of the properties I saw, and then just in closing. Just a thought, when I first came across this, I thought of a story of my children. My children cannot resist stuffed animals. And every time I go shopping, they want another one, and another one, and another one. And pretty soon, I can't walk through my house because of the stuffed animals. And I feel like sometimes our policymakers are like little kids and their stuffed animals. They want a regulation, and another regulation, and another regulation, and pretty soon, we cannot step around without tripping on these things, and it's harder for us to move on with our life. So maybe keep that in mind. Maybe get rid of another stuffed animal before you bring another one in. I don't know if that analogy makes sense, but so just remember that. And I appreciate your time, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just for the record, I didn't want the stuffed animal.
Hi, my name is Ashley Kidd. I'm here to kind of talk about more of the legal aspect of the overreach that seems to be happening with all of the ordinances being passed. We are in this amazing, wonderful, beautiful country, and we have had the gift of the right to choose for a long, long time. And I am just really wanting to remind everyone that this feels like we're trampling on the Constitution. And I don't know when the last time you guys read one of this copy of the Constitution, but we are granted the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And my kids, nothing makes them happier than little fuzzy creatures and chickens and things of that nature. But it's something that I really feel so strongly that we need to maintain our freedom in that sense. And I really encourage you not to pass this ordinance. In addition to that, I'd like to remind the citizens out here and the members of council that there are steps taken in the case where we are having our rights infringed on, and that will be pursued in court, like the quo warranto and things that will ensure that we don't have our rights trampled all over, because it's something that we can't get back. And I would really appreciate it if you would take this into consideration and not pass this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jessica Law-Schultz. I live at 360 South 100 West here in Logan. I used to not have a hard time speaking in public, but I do now. So, for me, we are just barely underneath that 10,000 square foot. We have a pretty big lot that goes back, and we have an agreement with our neighbors, so our coop's in our side yard, we've got an aviary system, and we have an agreement with them that it's okay where it is, and so, and they help us with our chickens as well. They help tend them when we go out of town and things like that. So I guess my question is, where we have that agreement, would somebody be able to just drive by and say, oh, I see a coop that's too close to a house, and so I want to enforce that? Would that be something, or would that not be something that we would have to worry about as long as we have that in agreement with our neighbors? That's one question that I have.
We're not gonna be chicken police.
Sorry, what?
We're not going to be chicken police.
Okay.
And we're generally complaint basis, so if we get a complaint, we'll go out and investigate. We're not gonna be driving around looking and seeing if your chicken coop is too close to your neighbor's house. And I would assume that if you've got a written agreement for your neighbor, that the folks that live there that are the property are comfortable with it, then it'll be okay.
Okay, and the other thing that I want to say about chickens, I agree with what was said previous about the numbers being too low. I mean, we are over the number for our lot. So that's one of our concerns that we have about that. We wouldn't know which ones to go out tomorrow and say, okay, well, we got to get rid of you 5. You know, you guys have got to go. I mean, I don't know how we would do that. It would just be, I don't know, I think that maybe some more research with veterinarians. With roosters, if you have a rooster that's wearing a collar and can't crow, is there a problem with that? You know, there's just certain things that I think are a little bit over the top. We have one, and it's a little seabright, and he actually saved our whole flock from a hawk. And we didn't let him die. We took him to the vet, and we paid, you know, almost $200 to get him stitched up. And he's only, you know, he's just a really tiny little guy. But yeah, we wouldn't want to have to get rid of him either. And for me, you know, I pretty much lost my whole life a couple of years ago, becoming disabled. And previous to that, I've been a police officer for the Utah State University Police Department for nearly 19 years. And my life has changed so much in every way. And tending my chickens while my husband's at work and while my kids are at school has been kind of what's kept me going. And I think I'm not the only one that is like that with their chickens. They're like my little pets, my little friends, our little family members. And so I would say that I would plead to have this not be passed for that reason. Because I think it's not just me, it's not just the people here. And I found out about it through a Facebook group. I didn't even know any of this was going on until recently. But that's really all I have to say. I can't really say any more, so thank you.
Thank you, Jessica.
Hello, John Chivik again. I don't know if you suspect this or not, but yes, I do have chickens. And I acknowledge where a lot of people are coming from on these. But I also acknowledge there's a few things. I'm glad that you're thinking about this and thinking hard about this, because this one's a little bit of a pickle, a lot maybe. Part of the thing I first hear is like, well, if it's not broken, don't fix it. You know, is it really enough of a complaint issue to really code something in? I don't know the answer to that. But then the other half that I really did like was guidelines. So if someone's coming in and wants to have chickens, it's kind of nice to have some guidance to say how to be a good neighbor, how to be a good animal owner. So I like that aspect of it. I don't know if these are the right numbers, especially hearing what everybody's saying in here. I do have concerns about the larger animals and things like that. Maybe you need permitting or something like that. And then the other last concern I have is looking for husbandry or extension for the square foot. As you know, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of bad actors and good actors, right? So somebody could have 10,000 square feet and have a little crappy little place, sorry, excuse me, a bad place for chickens. Or they can have a whole, a little space and have really good husbandry for chickens. So I'm not sure how to walk that line, but I also get concerned, and I know we need consistency, but also flexibility. Those are always impossible to get into policy, but that 6,001 versus 5,900 or whatever are just difficulties. And so I'd encourage you to think about this ordinance as not of a way to enforce, but maybe a way to promote good neighbors and good husbandry of animals for all these reasons that these people are talking about there. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Brian Brunson. I live in Logan. I serve on the Junior Livestock Committee for the Cache County Fair. Work with the 4-H kids. And I got a few, like everyone, I think that's on the animal side, I think we're pro. Give us as much latitude as you can. I think you got a hard line to walk, but I have one thing with the grandfathering. It looks like I'm good. I'm grandfathered in, but since 1995 when I moved into Logan, I've been told it was okay to have animals because the code, Logan City Code, was silent on animals. Now I understand that zoning technically made it illegal, but if the enforcement have repeatedly been telling us it was okay, and people went out based on that and said there is no law against me having this goat, and now you're saying, well, you didn't have a goat in 2000, so you have to get rid of your goat. I think that's a little unfair. I even had an interaction with a code enforcement officer in the spring of this year and was told chickens are fine in Logan. And I don't know if that's, I know you've been using the, it's not legal language, but I got the impression still, as late as this spring, that it was fine. So maybe that you don't have to go back to 2000, or maybe there could be a way for people that are doing some of these things now, and especially if they haven't had a complaint. They're not trying to raise 10 goats and 10 chickens and 10 ducks on a tiny little lot. And I feel like if an apartment can have 4 dogs or 4 cats or 3 dogs and 3 cats, I've got an acre of land. I think I should be able to do maybe a little more than this law. And like I say, I'm grandfathered in. I've been doing this since 1995. So, but I see like this young man over here. It's just so amazing what animals can do for kids. And so any opportunities we can preserve, these kids that I serve with in the junior livestock, they're amazing. And so but to be constructive tonight, I'd like to suggest that llamas also are not the size of cows or horses. Llamas should be more like a sheep or a goat. And I just would like to see maybe a little less restrictive. You can always come back in and tighten it up. Maybe start on the loose end. Maybe double these numbers and then half of them later if you have to. I don't know. I remember, Mark, your Uncle Bud, I remember being a young man and seeing some amazing, amazing birds, and I think he had a few more than this would allow him. So, I don't know, I understand we're all different, and this guy wouldn't want to live by me, and that's fine. But my neighbors actually, we have a couple of guard llamas, and I actually have neighbors that they name my animals because they love them so much. And we talked about the fourplex in the middle of the block. I've yet to have one of my neighbors say, I wish you'd built some fourplexes before the zoning changed. You know, so we all got to get along. I know you got to have some rules, but I guess my view is animals and agriculture is important to a lot of people, and if we can give some opportunity to the kids in Logan, they don't have FFA, they don't have some of the things that the county kids have, and it just is such a character builder. Like, I'm just so proud of that young man over there. Anyway, that's what I'd like to say.
Thanks, Brian.
I'm Jordan Luke. I live in the Adams neighborhood, and I kind of just want to echo like what some people say. I have 8 chickens, and right now, since it's gotten cold, yesterday I only got 1 egg, and my family, we go through about half a dozen eggs every day. So I don't look, right now I don't look at adding more to my flock, but as other people said, as they get older, that starts to dwindle. And I kind of would like to see some science based behind the size of animals that they have there. I'm going to admit I did not buy my chickens for eggs, I bought it for compost. I take care of the manure that comes from the chickens, I compost it. Everybody's surprised when they come to it because they think of compost as being stinky. My compost isn't, because I know how to do it properly. And the chickens have really helped me out. I don't take trash out to my waste bin as much. Every week I clean out my refrigerator, it goes into the chicken coop, chickens eat it, and it goes into my compost bin. It has dramatically lowered how much waste that I'm putting out of the city. I fill up my recycle bin faster. I would almost wish I could have 2 of them sometimes, because I get a lot of stuff that's recyclable, especially in the age of COVID with all the shipping stuff coming. So I really would like to see that change, because I would lose more than half of my chickens in my situation. And I know my chickens are happy. My son absolutely loves them. He's plays with them more than I do. I kind of see them as livestock, but I know other people don't see them that way. I know my son doesn't see them that way when he saw them coming up as baby chickens and older. And as I said, the thing that makes me feel the best about it is I'm providing the family with eggs. I'm reducing my carbon footprint. Sorry, Mark, I don't go buy fertilizer anymore. I'm using my compost.
Everybody had a compost anyway.
And it's done great stuff for my garden. I use it even just in other spots in my yard. And so thank you for your time, and thank you for your considerations.
Thank you. Just wait till we get the biosolids coming from the water treatment facility.
I'm actually excited for that.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you so much for your comments and for sharing your thoughts. We really do appreciate it. And we did get multiple emails as well too, and we'll weigh those as well as your comments. So if there's no one else, let's bring it back to the council for consideration.
So I actually do have a question based on something that was raised. So if you have 3 goats, can you also then, does the number of smaller animals preclude the addition of larger animals, I guess? I mean, because when you read it, it's not or, is it an and the way this is written?
Yeah, it doesn't preclude you from meeting the standards for each
category,
species or whatever, right? Some jurisdictions do have a carrying capacity type of model that says that if you've got 1 goat, it's equivalent to 15 chickens, equivalent to this. There's a way to get there, but we could pursue that.
Did you look at that at all?
Yeah, we did.
And the reason was there a strong reason to not pursue that?
It's the same as why we don't want to do permits. Just for us, it was like just pick a number and go with that number and use that as a guideline. But we can go after that where it's there's a carrying capacity type of methodology. It's preference, I guess. And the other comment I'll make too is, how do you, talking to somebody about basing this on science, really the key for any kind of regulation is it comes back to how well somebody maintains whatever they've got. So there's really not a scientific approach to saying that this plot of land can carry this many animals. It's really based on when you have a backyard approach or a backyard flock, it's how well does somebody maintain what they've got back there. And so somebody can do the worst job with 2 birds and somebody do the best job with 50 birds. And there's really no scientific way to say, how do you validate one or the other. And that's why, kind of jokingly I say whatever came out of the tree, and that's why we look at other jurisdictions. Because when this came around a few years ago, people went through the same type of hearing because it's very personal to people, right? These are their pets. My chickens are named after Disney princesses for whatever reason. That's what my granddaughter wanted, so that's what we did. But this is very personal. People have gone through the same type of angst, and so it's really what makes the most sense for you, looking at it from where you sit relative to everybody else in the city. Some folks want more, some folks want less, and that's, it's always, we write a rule because you have that one person that ruins it for everybody else, and that's really why we write a rule. It's not to strip your liberties, because the Constitution doesn't say you should have chickens, but we don't want to impinge upon your rights, but we always have to figure out it's the guy that does the wrong thing. How do you get him back in line so that he's not ticking off his neighbors?
Well, and I want to say that we're not taking anyone's chickens away from them that already have them.
That's correct.
We're not taking any animals away from anyone who already has them. We will not ask you to get rid of your rooster. We will not ask you to get rid of 5 of your chickens or anything like that. But a city has to come to a place where if you have 40 chickens in your yard and they're really, really bothering your neighbors have rights as well. And if they complain, we have to have some way of saying you've over-occupied on chickens and you can't have that many. If nobody ever complains because you're such a really good chicken handler and you take care of your chickens and they don't make any noise and you have 40 of them, we're never going to know that. Because as I've already said once or twice, we're not going to police for chickens. And I struggle with the fact that you have to have a standard. And you have to, as John said, when the new person comes, you have to be able to say, here's what our ordinance says you can do. And it's not trying to take away anything from anybody. It's only, if you don't have it written down, there's no way that your neighbor who's really upset that you have 10 goats on a 6,000 square foot lot and they smell, can come to the city and say, how you're impacting my quality of life, you're impacting my liberty, you're impacting my quiet enjoyment of my life, and do something. And if we don't have something written down, we can't do anything. So it's not for those who are already doing things and enjoying it and having neighbors who love the chickens and name the llamas. That's not what this is for. This is for, as we've said before, I've said before, the bad actors who don't take care of their personal chickens and ducks and whatever. I don't, I want to call them personal livestock, but that's not really a good term. So I don't want any of you to think of us trying to take something away from you, because we're not. But we are trying to create an environment where when new people come in, they know that there are some standards and they need to live within those standards. And if they come and they say, well, my next door neighbor has all this stuff, the city can say they were grandfathered prior to us passing an ordinance. And that's the way that works. You can keep having what you have without anybody ever getting upset with you. And they can't come to you and say, well, you're only supposed to have 6 and you have 8.
because you had 8 before this was passed. So I just want everybody to be really super clear about that part, because it's not punitive to the owners that exist.
Good answer. It's back to the council now, so sorry.
So what she's saying is we're all grandfathered in by that. Okay.
Thank you.
So if you're in HOA, you could have different rules. Is that just to clarify? So this is for any properties in the city outside of an HOA. So could an HOA allow more, or they have, the maximum would be what was set by this ordinance?
This would be the guiding factor would be our ordinance. An HOA can be more restrictive. They can't be less restrictive, or they can be, but you still default back to city code.
So that area up in Lundstrom Park, there is, the Deercrest does have an HOA that's not active, but that HOA up there for those lots of 20,000 could put different restrictions on than the city. For example.
Yeah, they've got CC&Rs up there, and if they say no animals, no livestock, then that's more restricted than our rules, and that would apply.
Okay, so that could answer some of Michael's questions if that area decided to invoke different rules.
Right, but that'd be on their responsibility to enforce those as opposed to the city.
Okay. Thanks for answering that.
So, and I'm right, we would grandfather everyone who has animals right now.
I'm gonna look to the attorney. I would agree that that's the easiest way to do it. Generally though, when you grandfather something, you can't grandfather something that's illegally created or illegally done. So illegality doesn't give you any grandfathering rights. That's why I went back and got those dates to figure out really if you go back to that date where we switched the rules. So if you were in existence prior to that rule date, when those rules changed, then yes, you'd be grandfathered. But from there forward, you wouldn't. Although the challenge is the existing code allows ag in NR2, NR4 areas. So if you're in an NR4 area right now, you've got chickens, then you would be grandfathered.
But if you're in NR6 or not.
But we're not gonna make people get rid of the chickens.
It's just easier to say, look, if you've got animals and we don't have a complaint pending about you, then we're gonna consider you grandfathered. Probably not the legalest way to do it, but I think that's the easiest way.
Craig's avoiding eye contact.
He doesn't get to that.
So I'll just read the definition of what legal non-conforming use is. A legally existing non-conforming use or grandfathered use is one that was legally established, has been maintained continuously, so it's not been abandoned for 12 months, and because of a change in the ordinance, it does not conform with current law. The city's not going to be out headhunting chickens and saying you come in and show us that you established this before 2000. But that is the definition of a legal non-conforming use.
I really think for most of our livestock keepers here, they are limited by their own choices and what happens. I think you see some people that might have 8 on a small property, but they're not looking to have 30. It's like it kind of self-regulates a little bit. So I would be comfortable with having a few more chickens possible. Some of the other livestock, I think our limitations are very accurate. I've got bees and yeah, it's cheap. Oh yeah, come on up. Yeah, I would say I've got bees, and so I'm really familiar with the regulations on the bees. I'm like really good with that. That was great that you got with the beekeeping club and a bunch of other people and got some input from that. So I'm good there. I don't have a whole lot of experience with the chickens. I mean, we had chickens when I was a kid, but we have an acre and a half, so it's like we could have as many as we could deal with. You kind of get to the point where the skunks and the raccoons, there's natural attrition with chickens in my neighborhood. So porcupines and everybody else that likes to visit our yard, we lost a lot of chickens, we'll put it that way. So, chief.
Obviously, the animal enforcement group falls under the umbrella of the police department. So my question is, and I understand what you guys are saying, how will the animal control officers know who had 8 chickens when this was established and who didn't? I mean, how will we enforce that rule that one person has 8 and we're grandfathered? I mean, is there a registration process? I mean, how will we know and how will we enforce? That's all I need to know.
Good point.
And citizens can apply for recognition of non-conforming use. They could submit an application to demonstrate, and then they pull that that form out that's been recognized.
So each individual owner could say, well, I've got 12 chickens, so they can come and get a non-conforming use application for their 12 chickens.
Yeah.
We would encourage them not to.
My son's looking for a job. I will say, I would like to learn more about the carrying capacity option, because I am a little troubled by the idea of somebody being able, but we're saying that bad egg that prompted a lot of this is because their yard is way over capacity. So that mix of what is legit for, especially for those larger animals or even the miniature animals, I'm just curious as to what a carrying capacity option could look like here in the city to prevent concerns like Michael's, and to ensure that we're not stinkifying the neighborhood too much. But I don't know what those look like, so it's.
And that's generally why you have setbacks from adjoining dwellings. Some jurisdictions do it from property lines. You have a fenced area so you keep animals contained. But when you look at the current example we're dealing with, these lots are 6,000 to 7,000 square feet in size, and those homes are probably within 15 to 20 feet of each other. So if you've got a lot that's 60 by 100 feet deep and you've got a pen in the backyard, you've got to be for livestock, you're going to be 50 feet away from your adjoining property. So some of that's self-limiting. But again, to define we can figure out what a carrying capacity is, but quite frankly, we've transitioned from an agricultural city or a town to a city of 50,000 with a university, and we're slowly changing. I don't know if it's really a huge value to us or not to have that standard. We're probably never going to enforce it or have to enforce it. You just pick a number in the sand and go with it, and then as people come in, that's the standard. But we can definitely delve into it if you prefer.
Where do we delve? 4-H, USU extension.
I have never owned a pet in my life, so I'm probably not the person to look to figure out what a carrying capacity would be. Doesn't mean I don't appreciate people's pets.
I think those would be good places to start.
I do echo your sentiments, Mark, and the chicken numbers seem a bit low to me as well.
I'd be okay going up to say 8, 12, 15, 20, 25.
Oh, cheapers.
25 is not that many. Seriously, you're going to lose half of them to chickens and to skunks and mice.
They're not too trained. They're supposed to be in food.
But
raccoons know how to open the door.
Okay.
So
I
you got to
do-
take precautions, right? Yeah, it's like you're going to lose them all if you don't. So.
Can I just say that I know the Planning Commission spent a lot of time on this. And I don't know whether you value their recommendations or not, but I know that they worked hard to get to this point. But I will say that I would like to not allow slaughtering of livestock in Logan, but that's just me.
Is that an addition?
Well, I'd like to make that change, but I'd like to make it say no outdoor slaughtering in front or side yard or backyard. No outdoor slaughtering.
Period.
But that would be my change. And I'll leave it to you all who have more experience with chickens to decide how many we need to have. I am concerned that we don't want to have someone, buy a house and all of a sudden have a farm in the backyard of animals. But I think that we're in a very interesting place in terms of society, because we have, I know when my dad was little, they had chickens that they got eggs from and then they ate them. And so now we've transitioned to the point where our chickens have much more meaning to everyone in the family than they did then. So we've changed, it's not agriculture the way agriculture used to be. It's some different animal that I'm hiring for.
Hybrid.
Yeah.
It's really a hybrid.
And so the rules, it's difficult to impose rules on emotionally supportive animals. So.
I think that's fair.
I don't know, I'm just rambling, I'm sorry.
That's fair. Yeah. You'd like to see a little higher numbers, Ernesto?
On the chickens, yeah.
What would you recommend?
What he said actually sounded good. 8,
I said
10?
8, 12, 15, 20, 25. And I do appreciate the work that the planning commission did, because they did a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of work. And we're open to suggestions as well too, if they were doing. I just don't think they got as many suggestions on the chickens as they did on the bees. So, would you like a little bit more information, Amy?
Yeah, actually, I would like a little bit more information. And we lived near chickens recently, and we had probably 8, and it seemed to not be a large quantity. So I guess I don't know. Did the 5 fall from the sky for the 6,000? I mean, will the planning commission, did they do a ton of research to identify that 5 was the thing, or is that just a starting point based on other cities' recommendations?
If you look at Hiram, 0 to 8,000 square foot lots, they can do 4 chickens. You look at Nibley, 0 to 12,000 square feet, you can't have any chickens. So it just varies. There's not a carrying capacity for a chicken.
But then you look at North Logan, and they got bigger section. Anything below 30,000, you can have up to 15, but then over that, you can have 15 plus. You can do something similar. So if it's over 15,000, you can have 20 plus.
You could do 1 chicken per 100,000
per 1,000 square feet. That was my suggestion right off the bat.
Here you go.
1 chicken per 1,000 square feet. Because it depends on how big your house is.
Yeah. But again, it all has to fit into the setbacks and where their corral or pen is. So it's got to fit into that as well too.
So I guess my question is just, I know you stated that that carrying capacity, that would be self-limited just by virtue of the size of pens and stuff, but if people are not nice pet owners and have small pens, they could have more animals in a small pen, and it would also be noisier, and if people are ready to vote, I could vote, but that is a question I have.
Well, in Draper, they have 1 for 1,500 square feet, max of 25.
What was that?
In Draper.
Yeah, one for every 1,500 square feet, and a max of 25.
Oh, from the base of the 11.5.
Yeah, but the minimum's a little lower. So I'm open for a motion if you want to get some more information, or if you want to vote on it.
I will move that we approve the code amendment, ordinance 21-22 with the following changes. That there would be a change to say no slaughtering of animals within the city, within your lot.
No outdoor.
Now outdoor slaughtering, oh geez, okay, no outdoor slaughtering. And to change the numbers of chickens to that, the ones that you recommended.
That I proposed, the 8, 12, 15, 20, 25.
So they would, instead of 5, 6, can you go back to that slide?
Yeah. Oops.
Sorry.
Quite a bit more.
Instead of 5, 6, 8, 10, and 15, it will be
8, 12, 15, 20, and 25.
Okay, that's what I move.
And we can always review this again too.
You have to have a second before anybody.
dying for the lack of a second.
I'm just, well, it's more just hung up on the horses and cows. So I don't know if I wanna offer a friendly amendment to try to figure out how to be more mindful of that. So just give me a minute.
I say we can continue and get some more information and maybe reconstruct a little bit, but there is a motion on the floor.
That is dying from the lack of a second.
Yeah.
So, we're back to square
Yeah,
one.
so Ernesto, do you want a second or do you want to like gather a little bit more information?
I would want more information.
So I would move to continue.
Yeah, so there's no second, but.
Move to continue this to the meeting on November 2nd.
Is there a second?
Second.
So, before you finalize it, you need to tell me what you're looking for, so I know what I'm supposed to chase.
So for me, the issue is just that the 20,000 square feet with the large animals, with the ability for people, and my concern is just, again, as I said, I understand that the idea of shelter or pen has to be 50 feet away, but it does seem to me that we really don't want to have the opportunity for massive mini farms. I guess that doesn't make sense, but I would like to see more of a limitation on the number of large animals. Because you could have 3 goats, and you could have 25 chickens, and you could have a cow, and you could have a horse, and that just seems to me to not fit into the city nature that Logan has developed into. So that's, I don't know, that's.
But in equestrian estates, that is what they wanted to, that's what they wanted.
And they're grandfathered in. They would be grandfathered in because that's been there, and that community was built that way. So that's different than having that created in an area where people purchased a home thinking that they were not going to be in an agricultural area. So I kind of guess like sort of kind of carrying capacity kind of thing, maybe, I don't know.
And I think your 4-H specialist at the extension would be a great resource for information on.
Yeah, so if you have a minimum pen size, that would set it apart from.
Perhaps we're looking at no more than 2 things or something like that. You can have chickens and sheep, or chickens and goats, or chickens and a horse, or chickens and a cow, or bees and chickens, or something like that. I don't know.
I'm not sure what it looks like. Mike is loving this, man. He's like, woohoo!
It's on the top of my list.
Yes. Okay. Motion? Did you second?
I second.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second to
Do you
continue
have
to
anything
gather
to
some
add to
more
what you
information.
want from Mike?
Mark, you're not continuing the public hearing though, correct?
Correct.
Just an action item.
But public is always welcome to send us more emails. If this is something, if we're on the right track, email, let us know. You know, you've been here to let us know your thoughts. You know, email us and say, hey, yeah, we like those new numbers. Those are more appropriate. Or, you know, yeah, because we need more information from people who are actually doing it. But I think we're getting more on the right direction where we'd like to be. So,
Because Jeannie said protect the rights of both
yeah,
sides of the property.
absolutely. So, it's been moved and seconded. We continue. We got a little bit more information. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, let's continue and gather a little bit more information, but see what we find out. I think we've got some great resources, Mike, to get a little bit more input. Hopefully it won't be a lot of work for you, but hopefully it'll be work for someone else.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your work in putting this all together. I think we're on the right track. Okay, let's move on to our workshop item. Resolution 21-53, Rich Anderson, please.
2 requests to appropriate reimbursements. The first is $72.99 for police overtime shifts, and the second one is $106,465 for fire wildland reimbursements. That's it.
And that's it. Any questions for Rich? Pretty straightforward. Thanks for finding us more money, Rich.
Well, they did.
Okay. Any other considerations for tonight?
Just a reminder, go look at the redistricting and
Yes.
weigh in.
And vote.
Important.
And vote. Units. All right. Thank you so much. Our meeting is adjourned for tonight. Thanks for your participation.